Hi, Rose Campbell. Today I'm going to be adding to my new series, Voices from History, and the one today will be on Martin Luther King. What I will be reading to you is a typed statement that was given to me in December of 1997. This was our first connection, but eventually Martin and I worked together, and he dictated to me a series of articles, let's say, and so now these are the words of Martin Luther King. I am ready, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. There is a great disparity between the lives of the one who founded this nation and the ones who were brought here to help with building of the other men's dreams. I am not one who could correlate the process of thinking that if one is of one color, then they are of superior wisdom and grace within God's design for the world. There are many who would make this a gulf of irreconcilable differences, but this is not a work that can be held up to the light of truth, and be made to appear as anything other than a blockage of the light as it appears from the very heart of God. It is an abomination that there can exist within an enlightened world the form of darkness that is expressed when there is hate and injustice for those who were also chosen to be made men in the image of God. It is a calling to the world of radical ideas that there is one set of rules for the ones chosen to be born with skin of ivory, and another set of rules for everyone of another hue. There is no land of milk and honey if there can be slavery for those who are also his chosen ones, and all who were created in his image are chosen as his sons. The holding of any into bondage is of a loathsome thing to the nature of God, and if there can be a man who can justify it with the word of God, allow him to set an example so that I might understand. There are many who would argue that God ordered the enslaving of the ones who were not chosen, but this is not of any great and logical sense when applied to the words of Christ, when he said that to love one another as our brothers was the newer commandment. It is true that the Israelites took for themselves the spoils and slaves from within the encampments that they encountered, but this is not of great value either when viewed through the lens of Christian compassion and love as taught by his Son. There can be a form of slavery where one does not own the other, but does not allow the other equal freedoms. The bonds of prejudice and hate are as strong as the manacles used to bind the feet of people who were exploited into slavery. There is no greater form of slavery than always being the one who must work or think or live where others decide that it is permissible. I am giving you this so that you will know that I speak not only for those of a certain skin color or of even a certain sex, but for all who are held in bondage by the small-mindedness of another. There is no greater need or call to be addressed than the freedom of someone to live up to their God-given potential, and to have the right to be treated as a brother or a sister. Allowing this error of thought to make its appearance within the world at any place or time does not but allow the light of God to be placed under a bushel basket of men's making. Freedom to create and be radiant in God's image is in serious threat when another may decide for you who you are to be, where you may worship, and how you may express your God-given talents. The freedoms that I appeal for are those to be what one will be, and to have the freedom to shine forth the light of God from within, without having a bushel basket of hate and prejudice blanking the entire thought of an individual because of his or her skin color and his or her sex. It is not enough to allow others to work where they will. It must be an entire way of life and of being for the light to shine as it is intended. Make no man a slave, and there shall be no man who is not served. My voice. Okay, but are you going to tell me your name? At least something that will dispel any doubts about your identity. I am going to work with the name that I had while there, and for your reference I am that which was known as Martin Luther King, Jr. I was a poor black farmer's grandson, and I grew up with the prejudice that existed in the South throughout my life. I was not allowed to go to school with the whites, and that was my earliest recalling of being treated less than the person who had another skin color. I used to watch the white children go to school, and I knew that they had better schools and supplies, and yet they seemed not to notice the difference as much as I did. I suppose if I had been white, then I too would not have noticed the lack of things given to another. They were very poor whites who lived near us, but still they had the respect that I felt the lack of. It was never a given that I would become the leader for civil rights that I did become. It was just something that I grew into as I read and deciphered the will of God for myself. I gave up my ministry to help the ones who were oppressed, not because there was a conflict of interest, but because there was a feeling of a new calling within my heart, and a house divided will not be built with a strong foundation. It was to no avail to work from the pulpit to organize the freedom marches and pressure, for there was no public forum if you were concentrating on the ones who knew they were oppressed. It had to be brought to the streets and had to be made public in the political arena rather than just in the religious world. It is a sad statement of affairs when the words of God holds no effect upon the men's of mind, but that is the way I understood this issue to be. It was with regret that I gave up my religious ministry, but it had to be a priority that I reach those who were of a non-religious mind, for they were the greatest force behind the hate and anger. It would not have done for me to have assumed that a man of religion would sway with those who had spurned the name of God and religion for the purpose of hate and prejudice. I am not saying that I was unaware that many of religious persuasion were not of the guilty also. Many great atrocities had been done in the name of the Lord, and this was another reason that I felt I had to forego the way of being a man of the Lord. I had to reach out to them as another man, nothing less, nothing more, and hope that they could see the dream and the vision that I held as being the one to make the hate and prejudice cease. I was never in doubt that I could reach some, and I was never in doubt that I could reach many, but I was in doubt that I could bring about the reformation and restoration that I desired within the world's attitude about segregation, work equality, and access to the realm of being an American citizen with full rights and respects for those who not yet had known of these things. My father once said to me that if every man could but read and every man could but work with his hands to earn his just due, then there would be no poor and there would be no one to whom charity had to be given. I felt his words to me were prophetic within the intent, and I made it a cause to see if he was right. I marched to Selma not just for the civil rights of the blacks, but for the rights of every individual who had the dream to forego the tyranny of having someone stop them from being who they might become and having what they might earn. I am well aware that I am known as the black civil rights leader, but that is not what I wish to be remembered for. I aided not only those of dark skin, but also those who were the fellow members of the underprivileged and held down societies. I began my marches with the clear idea of being the one who took the plight of the nation's prejudiced against to the street, hoping to make the world see that there was an overwhelming amount of hate and prejudice that existed within our nation, and to put a spotlight upon it. I am grievous that the world felt me only the champion of the blacks, for that was yet only another example of the way in which the world can only see black and white, and not the true heart of the matter at hand. While it is true that the blacks had the most boisterous voice, there was indeed a calling out by others. There will always exist some of prejudice if we allow ourselves to see only issues as black and white, instead of the basic needs of human to be free to be who they were intended to be by their Creator. If I work with you for the purpose of setting the record straight, I would wish that you would give this some thought. I know that you have very little knowledge of my life, for the ones who approached you with this have instructed me of this fact, and want me to give you the will to work also with the knowledge of what I stood for, and why I need to work with the world again to make them see that I was not only a leader for the black equality movement, but for the furthering of basic human rights for all who were being oppressed. Please make this a priority to find out what I stood for and why I led the marches. It will only help us in the formation of another attack upon the forces that would enslave the downtrodden through ignorance and lack of respect for their basic humanness. I am going to let you go and get settled with this idea and allow you time to research my life, and then we will speak again. It will serve us both well if you understand who I was and who I am now. It is not the one and the same, yet I cannot really say that I have changed for the better or the worse. It is more appropriate to say that now I have a clarity that was not there while I lived among the trees. The forest is so much clearer now that I can have a bird's eye view of the terrain. This is the best analogy that I have for you. How mighty does the eye become when the scales are lifted? Give my words some thought and reflections. I will await your approach again for the continuation of our dialogue. Many thanks to you and your friends here for the great honor of speaking again to the world of men, who were truly created in the image of God. If the world could only conceive that thought in its totality, then my work would have never begun. May your worlds help one another to see this concept, and to remove the bushel basket that exists to further restrict the light of God and His truths.